Welcome back, everyone, to The Phoenix's Tale, the weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am sharing my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. I am your host, Gabe, and this week we are going to be diving into Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 4, Keeper of the Keys. So, let's do a recap. This week, Harry finally gets to meet Hagrid. For those of you who aren't familiar with the story, that's who was pounding on the door in the middle of the night while Harry and the Dursleys were stuck on that hut on the rock in the middle of the ocean. So Hagrid comes in, proceeds to tear off the front door, terrifies the Dursleys, fusses over Harry, informs Harry that he is a wizard, and Harry finally gets to read his letter. We find out a bit more about the night Harry's parents died. Thus resulting in Harry being raised by the Dursleys. We learn about Voldemort and how he'd gone after James and Lily, and when he tried to kill Harry, something happened, and suddenly Voldemort was gone. We see the rejoicing in Chapter 1, so we've kind of come full circle on that a little bit. And we learn that Voldemort is not truly gone, so the question now becomes a matter of when and not if at this point. And we all know when that happens for those of us who are familiar with the story. Before we continue, I want to get something off my chest here because this is one of the many reasons why I despise the movies and why I thought the movies did such a terrible job. Because as it's laid out in the books, in the movie. Let's do that route first. As it's laid out in the movie, we see Hagrid walking in and start talking to Dudley as though he's Harry, which is complete bullshit. Okay? Hagrid knows Harry. Hagrid knew James and Lily. He knew his parents. So in the book, the second he walks in, he knows immediately who Harry is because he looks just like James at the same age. Hagrid was already the groundskeeper and the keeper of the keys at Hogwarts. We find out more in Chamber of Secrets about that, but Hagrid knew who Harry was from the off. So that bullshit in the movies was just that. It was complete and utter bullshit. And I just get so riled up with this because they could have done an amazing job with the movies, and I get that they are trying to tell this much story in this amount of time. I get that, but why would you change something like that? That is just so ridiculous because the overall theme throughout the entire 7 books is you look so much like your father, Harry, but you got your mom's eyes. How many times does Harry get told that throughout the series, that he looks like James, but he has his mom's eyes? Ugh. So holy shit. Oh God, I swear. Yeah, so for those of you out there who have only watched the movies, I highly, 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 highly urge you to please read the fucking books. The book is the story. The books are the story, not the pieces of shit movies, okay? The only thing that I liked at this point is that we get to see Quidditch being played on the screen in front of us. That's really the only thing about the entire series that I like. So, I've gotten that out of my system. So let's take a moment to consider just how confusing everything must have sounded to Harry. Okay? And how frightening this must sound. It was mentioned at the end of Hagrid's story that not only did Harry remember that flash of green light, we get mention of this in chapter 2. And it is, the way it's worded is that, he supposed that that's what happened during the crash, but he can't imagine where all this green light came from. Well, after hearing Hagrid's story, he remembers the flash of green light, but for the first time in Harry's life, he remembers hearing Voldemort's cold, cruel laugh. I don't remember exactly. I should have probably written it down for myself in my notes. But he remembers Voldemort's laugh for the first time. All he's ever remembered from that is that flash of green light. And being on Hagrid's motorcycle. We find that out in chapter 2 when they're going to the zoo, because Harry makes mention of, hey, I had a dream last night about a flying motorcycle. And of course, Uncle Vernon just lost his shit over that. We also hear from Aunt Petunia, which I wanted to kind of dive in more, because we find out just how bitter she is about her sister being special and feeling ignored by her parents. Petunia, not Lily. I imagine Lily or Petunia felt quite ignored, shoved to the side, because she's described in the books as not being nearly as pretty as Lily was. And now Lily's a witch, and their parents were all just so excited that they had a witch in the family, and it was, oh, Lily this and Lily that. We're going to circle around to that in a minute, because we also talk about Harry's disbelief about being a wizard, despite his constant desire for some unknown relative to come and rescue him from the Dursleys. So let's get back to Aunt Petunia's rant for a minute, because this is one that I have pretty much felt my entire life when it comes to my relationship with each of my brothers. As somebody who is autistic, which I didn't know about until just about a year ago now, my weirdness felt like such a spotlight on me in my own mind, indicating just how much I stood out to those around me, but also never quite fit in with those around me. And when it came to my parents, especially after the divorce, I very much became the parentified daughter. And this is going to be this week's psychology lesson, because we need to talk about this. This is something that I have been hearing more and more from a lot of fellow Gen Xers. I am a Gen X, 1971. And my brothers and I were some of the original latchkey kids. I'm sure you've heard that term bandied about. And as the oldest child and being the only daughter, we're going to dive into what this means. So I'm going to be reading from my notes primarily here for the next bit. So a parentified daughter is a term used to describe a daughter who, due to dysfunctional family circumstances, takes on roles and responsibilities typically reserved for a parent. This phenomenon, known as parentification, can come in two forms. Instrumental parentification. Here, the daughter is burdened with practical or physical tasks such as cooking, cleaning, or managing household finances. This role forces her to be a mini adult long before her developmental stage would naturally allow for it. I felt this most prevalent with my dad when it came to divvying up the chores and everything. Anytime we would have to go stay the weekend with him. Once we got moved to Michigan, it was over the Christmas holiday break from school in late 1985. And the summers that we had to go back every summer at my mother's expense, because that was part of the deal from my father agreeing to let us go with our mom to Michigan when things got really bad after the divorce. And I had to do the girl chores. I had to do or start the cooking. I had to do the dishes. I had to do the laundry. I didn't get to mow the lawn. I didn't get to take the garbage out. I didn't get to do what my brothers got to do. I had to do the girl chores. And to be perfectly honest with you, as stressful and anxiety-inducing my childhood was when my parents were married, I never felt that sense of misogyny from my father. I never felt that sense that, oh, I couldn't be an astronaut. I couldn't be a doctor. I couldn't be, what were some of the other things I wanted to be? Mostly a doctor and an astronaut. The astronaut one hasn't left me. So, you know, Richard Branson, if you're out there and you want somebody for a publicity thing to go on your space plane, I would absolutely love to do that. I'm just saying. Um, I never felt that sense of I can't do these things because I'm a girl. I absolutely got these things that I couldn't do these things because I'm not smart enough. I'm too lazy. I'm doing things wrong that don't take me down that road to becoming an astronaut or becoming a doctor, whatever it was that I wanted to be as a child. It was just flat out I was useless, and there was no point in even going for it or trying for it because I wasn't smart enough to do any of that shit. Had nothing to do with my gender. The chores, when I was a later teen in high school, those summer visits, guess what was divvied out by the girl chores and the boy chores? Yeah. That's when I really started feeling that, and that's where, for the most part, the instrumental parentification comes in. There's also emotional parentification. And yes, this one came from my mom. In this dynamic, the daughter becomes an emotional caregiver. She may be expected to provide comfort, support, or even act as a mediator in family conflicts when her parents or siblings are in distress. This role reversal often places a heavy emotional load on her at a time when a carefree childhood would be most appropriate. I don't know if I have mentioned it yet in this podcast. I'm sure I probably have, but when things got really bad, I would say about a year and a half before we moved to Michigan in 1985, I still remember hearing my mom cry herself to sleep because she's working 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads, food on the table, and my asshole father was bitching and having some lame-ass excuse for why child support was late. Okay, I have mentioned this on this podcast. This just clicked in. And it was only $600 a month. Not per child, per month. It was $200 per child. $600 total. I remember what that house looks like because of all of this. Yeah. A carefree childhood would have been nice, let me tell you. These roles arise frequently in households where a parent struggles with issues such as mental illness, addiction, or severe emotional unavailability. In such environments, the parent relies on the daughter to bridge emotional or practical gaps, which can inadvertently send the message that her needs are secondary to keeping the family afloat. That's how I feel about that. A long-term psychological impact on parentified daughters is significant. Some common traits and struggles include, we're going to do checklists here. Chronic overwhelm and burnout. Because they've been conditioned to manage crises from a young age, these daughters often carry an exhausting sense of endless responsibility into adulthood. Check. Difficulty asking for help. Check. I don't even need to read the description on that one. Having learned to shoulder burdens alone, many struggle to trust others with their needs and often attempt to manage everything without assistance. Perfectionism and people-pleasing. Check. They can develop a compulsion to be good or flawless in order to ensure that everything stays under control, often sacrificing their own well-being in the process. Struggles with identity and boundary setting. Growing up focused on others' needs can lead to confusion about one's own desires, making it hard to set limits or prioritize self-care. Check. Guilt and anxiety. Check. I got all 5 of them, folks. There is often a pervasive internalized belief that if something goes wrong, it must be because they failed in their caregiving role, which fuels ongoing anxiety. Over time, these early experiences can shape relationship patterns and self-worth. In adulthood, a parentified daughter might find it challenging to relax, trust others, or even enjoy spontaneous moments, as her ingrained sense of duty and responsibility often interferes with her ability to take care of herself. you need a worst case scenario expert? I'm your girl. Jesus Christ. On the positive side, apparently there's a positive side to all this. Some of the resilience, empathy, and organizational skills developed in such a high responsibility environment can serve as strengths, but not without the cost of significant emotional strain and the need for healing. Healing from parentification often involves a process of reconnecting with one's childhood, recognizing unmet emotional needs. Therapeutic approaches might include inner child work, boundary setting exercises, and learning to trust others with responsibilities to help shift the focus from perpetual caretaking to self-care and personal growth. This journey can empower a parentified daughter to embrace her own identity separate from the role she was forced to play during her formative years. And for a little extra clarification, I did dive a bit deeper to answer the question if this applies to the eldest daughter, regardless of her birth order in the family. So the birth order in my family is me, the eldest, California brother, the middle child, Michigan brother is the baby. So basically, would I have still been the parentified daughter had I been the middle child or even the youngest child? In this same dynamic, the same two brothers, I was just either second or third as opposed to the first child. Okay. What I found was interesting. Why the eldest daughter? Cultural expectations and social conditioning have long painted girls as natural nurturers. Psychologists have noted that even when both boys and girls could reasonably share responsibilities in a turbulent family situation like divorce, the eldest daughter is more often tapped for extra responsibilities. The narrative of the oldest daughter syndrome illustrates that she is expected to step up, not just as an older sibling, but also as a surrogate caregiver for both her younger siblings and even her parents. Guess who did not go to therapy during all of that? Because she couldn't afford it. This isn't solely a function of birth order, but of the added overlay of gendered expectations. Caregiving and emotional work are often seen as feminine traits in many households. So then I dug in a little deeper and wanted to know about the oldest child, regardless of gender. So the eldest child's role, so let's say it's a boy, versus the eldest daughter's role. Well, there are cases where the eldest child, regardless of gender, assumes extra household or emotional responsibilities. The gender dynamic plays a significant role. In many families, particularly under the duress of divorce, even if the eldest child is a boy, parents might still unconsciously allocate caregiving roles to their daughter or daughters based on these traditional roles. Research and anecdotal evidence show that girls, especially the firstborn daughters, often end up bearing a disproportionate emotional and practical load in the family, which is not to say that if there are only boys in a family dynamic, parentification doesn't occur. It can, but is often less emotional supportive ways, often in less emotional supportive ways. Than often seen with daughters. And the parentified daughter can happen regardless of her birth order within the family. In other words, she could be the only daughter, but the baby of the family, and still end up being the parentified child. So clearly this is not the case with Aunt Petunia and Lily, but there was certainly a lot of animosity because Lily was beautiful, she was smart, she was funny, and she was a witch. Something her parents always bragged on whenever they could. When thinking about how I connect my life to Harry's in this chapter, I understand just how angry and frustrated Petunia is because I often felt like my brothers could do no wrong, whereas so much was expected of me. And this is where I have been dealing with a lot of those types of things. Now that I put everything to rest with my father in that dynamic, he is absolutely positively out of my life. And if he pops up again, it doesn't matter because I'm done. I've been done, like really done, since my birthday last year, which is in November. But that sense of responsibility, and my mom basically saying I'm in charge and that my brothers had to listen to me. Well, I was 12 when the divorce was finalized. It was on my birthday in 1983 when it was finalized. And that would have made California brother 10, and Michigan brother was 7, almost 8. So guess who they didn't want around a lot of the time? Guess who they never listened to, despite the fact that mom told them I was in charge? If I say, no, you can't go do that, or yes, you can go do that, whatever. And I hated it because not only did I know that my brothers didn't give a shit, they did whatever the hell they wanted. I would be the one at fault if something bad had happened to them. They would not have gotten in trouble for not listening to me. I would have gotten in trouble for not stopping them from going somewhere. Or I would have been in trouble for starting the fight to prevent them from going somewhere that I said no, or mom said no. I truly do understand Petunia's outbursts in this chapter, because there is a lot that I am processing still with that within my own. My brothers didn't have the respect for me at all. And it would have been all my fault if something bad happened to them for ignoring what I told them to do. So something else that's unique to the dynamic, and I'm just looking at my notes here. It's been within the last couple of years that I figured this out for myself, because my grandmother did the same to my mom and my uncle. And there are two key aspects to this that I want to talk about. The first is the sense of misery loves company. In certain aspects of my life matching up with my mother's, it's as though she's happy that I'm suffering because she suffered in the same manner. She feels that sense of camaraderie with me by this, whereas my mindset was, oh, that was fucking awful. There is no way that I would ever do this to my child, regardless of their gender. And that is how I have, to the best of my ability, tried to raise my son. Either, what's the word I'm looking for? Protecting him to the best of my ability. And when I can't protect him, when he has to go through some of these lessons, I do my best to prepare him and always be there for him when he needs me. Because, again, oh, she's fine. Yeah, got that shit a lot. But that weird sense of camaraderie, and based on, again, just what I have been seeing on social media apps, especially like on TikTok, where we can have these conversations, this is definitely something that a lot of my fellow Gen X female comrades in arms talk about with their boomer moms or boomer parents, is that sense of camaraderie that they feel, that sense of closeness. That's where they relate to us. And oh yeah, I know it was awful, but I dealt with it just fine. And you know, it's like there's a celebration that I'm struggling in this same area. Okay. Wasn't sure I was going to share this story, but I'm going to share it. One of the things that I have most wanted for myself since I was about 12 years old, because of all this dynamic stuff going on, is I've wanted more than anything to meet my person and to get married. I've dated not much in my life. My longest relationship lasted 5 months. Never been married. We'll talk about the ring another time because that does come into some other aspects of my life a little bit more recently. But long story short, I'm choosing myself and not just romantically. This also includes platonic. Um, so I want this for myself. And I know that there's just an incredibly amazing person out there who is going to think I'm just as incredibly and amazing for him or her that, yeah, let's do this. Let's get married. We want to be together. We want to do this. And anytime that I have dated somebody where the potential for that long term could be there, I get a very odd vibe from my mom. Um, Almost like, okay, we're going to go into some codependent issues here. Very codependent on both sides. I'm taking my responsibility. But this sense that there's like almost like this low grade sense of panic in her that, oh, what happens if this works out and she gets married kind of a vibe. So she's never really liked anybody I've dated. Some, yeah, I will give it to her in retrospect that she was right. But some of them, yeah, almost like I'm cheating on her. If not to go down that dark path, but that feeling has come up a lot with the codependency issues. And, it's almost like she celebrates whenever any of my relationships have ended. Oh, I'm not seeing this person anymore. So, yeah, it's been interesting unpacking a lot of that, and I've been doing a lot of that over the last year and a half, pretty much since I started writing and researching and doing what I needed to do for the podcast. So, um, but like I said, we'll wrap that one up uh, with that reminder to myself more than anything that um, there's there's things that I want to do my level best to prevent my son from ever having to experience. I know I can't do everything. I know there are things that he is going to have to experience. And all I can do is be there and listen to him and be there for him and prepare him. This is going to suck for a while, and it's okay for it to for a while. When his first real girlfriend broke up with him a couple years ago, I'm like, I wish I had something to tell you to make you feel better instantly. I wish I could take your pain away, but I can't. This is one of those things as your mom that I have to deal with, that you have to go through this. But one thing I promise you is one, it will get better, and two, whatever you need, just ask. I will be there for you, whatever you need. Another aspect of this, and this goes back to seeing how my grandmother has always been with my mom and my uncle, and with me and my brothers, and my cousin. I have two cousins, one male, one female, and how my grandma is with her versus the way she is with him. Oh, yeah. Mom carried that one too. Is being held to this higher standard where the boys needed gentleness and care. Oh, you poor boy, versus, suck it up. I had to deal with it too, so do you. I'm real close with my daughter now because she's suffering the way I did. It's no wonder. Sorry, that one made me laugh. It's no wonder, especially over the lack of emotional safety to express myself over the last 10 years or 12 years. Not just with the PTSD, but my entire life really is. I've only just recently decided to show up differently, basically, in my own life. And I have been working on cutting off my mom and my baby brother, Michigan brother, from the emotional support because I didn't get it. Why should they get it from me? I mean, my brother once told me that he's always thought of me as the backup mom because he could always depend on me for that emotional support when mom's not there. He's going to be in for a rude awakening. So, yeah, I doing my best under the circumstances, at least until everything starts gaining traction and I can start monetizing everything and diving into a couple other things I'm looking into to help monetize. Yeah, I'm doing my best to, I've withdrawn as best as I possibly can that emotional support because I'm not giving out to people what I'm not getting from them in return. And when things start going better for me, the only thing that my mom is ever going to get, I hope to God she's sleeping still. She's got to work tonight. Is financial support. I'll make sure she can retire, but that's all she's getting. Anyway, back to Harry, Hagrid, and the Dursleys, okay? So, to say that I understood Petunia in this chapter is an understatement. The difference being that it left her bitter and hateful. And yeah, I carried that for a long time. But on the other hand, one of the things that I have found and discovered about myself thinking back as best as I could, so much trauma and abuse and all of that shit has robbed me of my memories. But I remember the emotions. I've always approached things from how do I feel better? Because this sucks. Okay? I don't like feeling like this. I don't like feeling like that. How can I feel better? And clearly Petunia didn't go through that word. But like I said, I do understand it. So let's talk a little bit about Harry and just how weird that it had to have been for him hearing Hagrid's story about his parents, about the night they died, and how Harry ended up with a scar, and that Voldemort's not really gone. After being told that he's famous, Harry understandably felt like there was a mistake. I would have. Even though I wished for something better, or wished for somebody to come take me away from the madness that, I was growing up in, it would have been weird. It would have been a mistake. Oh, no. I can't possibly be all these things that you say I am. There's no way that Harry could be a wizard. This was a common theme with me my entire childhood and well into adulthood, as I've just mentioned. There was nothing good about me, thanks to the verbal abuse from my father. I remember getting compliments from people, but I never believed them. And I mean never believed them. The friends who left me feeling like I was an option, a backup plan, a good enough until somebody better comes along. The constant, she's fine, as long as my big feelings don't make somebody else's big feelings uncomfortable with their feelings. Yeah, that constant, she's fine, parentified daughter bullshit from my parents. And yes, it was both of my parents, as I said at the beginning of that little section, leaving me to essentially fend for myself and figure shit out for myself, all while believing I was doing life wrong. Thank you, Dad. I mean, how could I possibly do anything of any level of success when I did everything wrong? It's a valid question. And when considering my autism, how fucking confusing everything felt to me, because no one bothered to explain things to me, as I was the she's fine child. But really? What the fuck? The number of times I wish I had someone like Hagrid to come in and lay down the law with my father. More importantly, somebody to protect me. Growing up, I always wish I had a sister. I never wanted another brother because I had two. But there were fleeting moments where I wish I did have an older brother. Because in those moments, I do remember thinking maybe he would understand me. Maybe he would see what was really going on. Maybe he would stand up to my dad and do his level best to protect me from all of that. Someone to boost me up in some way, to cheer me on. And thereby boosting my own self-worth, as it were, my confidence. But I was all alone in that, just as Harry was. And going back real quick to the parentified child thing, what I was talking about more with like the chores and the cleaning duties and the cooking and stuff, we see that with Harry. I mean, he's expected to make breakfast for Dudley's birthday. He gets in trouble. He has to go and do all sorts of chores. So I do believe that there was a lot of parentification there. A lot of neglect, obviously, emotional neglect, and damn near everything else was neglected as well. I mean, he had whatever food he could get scraps of before Dudley shoved it in his face, wearing Dudley's old clothes. I mean, Harry was not cared for at all in this. So, this is going to be a shorter episode. I love it. I thought these first few episodes would be about a half hour, but we're been clocking in at just shy of an hour. So, we're going to recap here before I log off. Harry's a wizard. Hagrid tells Harry how things stand. Harry is unsure of Hagrid's story, and yet Hagrid is fully confident in Harry's powers, given how magically powerful James and Lily were, who Hagrid, I get the feeling, knew very well. Harry finally begins to feel some sense of excitement about leaving the Dursleys, at least during the school year. And I believe I talked about this last week or the week before, about how much better high school was for me than I tend to hear from people. That high school sucked for them. High school was great for me because that meant I didn't have to deal with my dad 9 months out of the year. I had to deal with him over the summer because that was the deal in letting us go with Mom when she had to finally give it up and move back here to Michigan. Same house we're living in right now. This was something my grandmother built. And yeah, so I lived in the same house when I was in high school, but I had that reprieve for 9 months. So I can imagine how excited Harry must have been too, even though he's probably wondering what the fuck is going on here. So not unlike the summer visits with my father that we had to do in order to move to Michigan to be with my mom. I don't remember my daydreams or imagination from that time, but I do remember them being much more positive in nature. About what my life could possibly look like being the California girl living in Podunk, Michigan. Okay. And overall, as I just mentioned, it was a vast improvement for me. So I understand Harry's excitement too of, oh, I don't have to deal with these people. Anyway, that wraps up this week's episode for me. Next week, join me when we dive into Chapter 5, Diagon Alley. That's going to be a lot of fun to dive into because Harry and us, as the reader, gets the first real in-depth look at the wizarding world. And Harry's going to learn just how famous he really is. So there's going to be some stuff to unpack there as well for next week. But until then, Potterheads, thank you for joining me this week. I will see you next week when we talk about Diagon Alley and get to enjoy all the fun things about being in the magical world in London. And until next week, remember, you're a wizard, Harry. Have a good one, everybody.